guys, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for being with me for another YouTube video of the week. If you are new to my channel, I am glad you're here. This is a wonderful resource. It's just a free kind of online archive that I provide where people send in their questions and I answer from my heart and my spirit and my soul. If you have never checked out my website, then I always invite you to do so. That also is a great resource. If you'd like one-on-one sessions with me, private sessions, those are available online and scheduling that way, as well as any further development of your psychic gifts, your shamanic knowing, and really just the sacred intuitive arts, healers. I have a wonderful masterclass that's online. If you haven't checked it out, it is full of individual modules, so you can do them one by one and pick kind of topic-based interests, or you can do the entire curriculum. That is a powerful and truly transformative resource if you're interested in really wanting a deep dive into how to strengthen, recognize, and use your spiritual gifts. All right, and the website's themodernshaman.net, if I didn't say that already. Here's the question of the week. Let's see. It says, Rachel, do you have any words on the spiritual significance of tattoos? I am curious about their history and history in shamanism and how to charge and ritualize them to heighten my spiritual practice. Thank you for everything that you do. Wow, that's a biggie, and that goes way back. Tattoos, wow. Yeah, really, body art, if we even broaden that, tattoos are different because of their longevity, right? But even painting the body, this has been an ancient practice of indigenous cultures for thousands of years. I mean, it goes way back. Pretty much as long as there has been life, there has been death. And death practices and rituals of mourning, of ashes on the head, of painting the body, of burying the face, and putting dirt on the body, of showing a sense of mourning and sorrow. And really death rituals were the beginning of where we started to see indigenous cultures symbolically representing their grief. Gosh, but you know what? And again, that's painting. And then there's so much here where I'm like, oh, where do I want to go with this? The history topic, that is fascinating. Because there's really, that is a rabbit hole in itself. I mean, you could just, there's people that specialize in that, and I definitely don't specialize in it, but I'm aware of it in just the practices of shamanism. And really, I'm broadening out shamanism as a sense of indigenous practice and ritual in connection with believing that all things are spirit infused, all kingdoms on the earth, all aspects of life have a sense of spirit infused with them, and the practice of honoring that. I mean, you can look at indigenous tribes everywhere in the world and see sacred tattooing way back. Buddhist culture has this, Polynesian cultures has this, all over Asia, South America, Africa. I mean, it's really all over the planet. And depending on the culture, the tattoos were used in various ways to signify all sorts of different things. Like I said at the beginning, it began with a sense of death and the cycle of death. A lot of ancient ritualistic practices began with death because that was our first experience of coming face to face with the veil and asking that question of what is beyond life. And that gut-wrenching, soul-wrenching space of wanting to be or have available a bridge to the non-physical. And so wanting to reach beyond, this is where a lot of our earliest practices came from. when we look at the spiritual significance of things, and again, the transference of beyond death, or wanting to reach into the veil and the shadows of the other side. And so a lot of the first practices and representations of like symbolic art, whether it be art that was depicted outside of the body or on the body, but the physical representation on the body a lot of times was to exemplify a sacred process that someone was going through. So the death ritual was a lot of where that came from in the beginning. Like I shared about covering themselves with dirt or ashes, or even urine. Urine was sacred in a lot of cultures for a long time. There's a lot of practices with that, even in the kind of like excrement on the body. I know that sounds gross to a lot of our cultures, our current modern cultures, but if you look at ancient historical practices, a lot of that was done in symbolic representation of the death cycle, and then new life cycle, and the birth cycle. So a lot of the beginning of those tattoos and the dark pigmentation that was associated with them was associated with death and kind of that crossing over. They even had a lot of practices in various kind of indigenous cultures, which would be considered like self-harm today, but essentially practices that were sacrificial in nature, because they viewed so much of life and all the things that they had to use to survive. The survival of the tribe would be a lot of times through killing another species or taking the life even of plants and animals, and these things were highly revered and respected in shamanic communities and indigenous tribes. And so a lot of them, early tattooing or early even just skin grafting and skin art, they weren't always pigmentation, but kind of like scarring, they would do with a sense of like life for a life, or a sense of representation that I am aware that I am taking a life, and so I am giving in a sacrificial way of my own blood and my own life source. And so there was a lot of this that went on. This is kind of the basis also and foundational understanding of a lot of the ancient practices of sacrifice, of blood sacrifice, and these what can be seen as very dark practices. They weren't done always in a dark manner. A lot of times they were done in a very highly honoring and respectful manner. And a lot of personal scars and things like this were done in representation of life that they knew had been taken from another tribe, or another human, or from the animal kingdom, even from plants and the resources around them that were highly revered and respected for this spirit that imbued all of life. So that was also very, very early on ancient practices done, and they were more like mutilation of the self or scarring of the self. Again, they didn't always have pigmentation. Pigmentation came on later, and again, it depends on the culture that you're looking at. Shamanism has been around forever, and as it surfaced in different areas on the planet, it looked different ways, right? It had different cultural overtones to everything. And so history, as we know, is cumulative, right? It kind of builds upon one another. And so there are parts of the stories and the reasons why different cultures did what they did kind of built on each other. There are also a lot of tattoos that were done similar to the way that we give badges of honor or growth or representations of life-changing events. They were symbolically represented with tattoos. Tattoos that almost like a badge, again, like a marking of honor. This was mostly in the warrior tribes, right? When you see warriors coming in, and similar to the way even today in a lot of inner city cultures where they do like the tear marks for the lives that they've taken, or different symbols like that are representative of loss or of taking life. warrior tribes have done this for thousands of years, where they have tribal markings, rings, or sometimes they did beaded, what looked like beaded necklaces, and they used the bone combs. And so they would have tapping cones, or what they would call tappers, depending on the culture, that would use bone and graphite, or sometimes even meteorite that was ground up, ash, again, oftentimes mixed with urine or water, and combine it to create that pigmentation and lasting color. And it would be a sense of markings of honor. Those are not, and then they would be used in ceremonial, almost the way that we would have a graduation, coming of age, of saying, now you are a man, your flesh has changed, you have taken on the rings of honor. A lot of women had fertility tattoos. This was also common in a lot of tribal and shamanic communities, to say that they were capable of being strong bearers of children and good wives. And so they would create fertility tattoos, sometimes on their face or in areas where they could be seen. There's also a whole nother realm of tattooing for protection that was done for spiritual protection, almost like the evil eye, when they think about having the eye of Horus, or the evil eye as a sense of protection. They would tattoo on birds, or birds of prey, or birds of protection. They would invite in guides and almost channel spiritual tattoos as a sense of spiritual protection, or the pattern that they would be weaving on the person's body, that were done literally to ward off evil spirits. This was also a practice in a lot of shamanic communities, where the shaman would perform in a ritualistic fashion. So they would go into a state of trance, and they would channel a tattoo that would be a sense of protection for that individual. There's also like medicinal tattoos, and this is ancient also, like medicinal shamans that used tattoos as a sense of, similar to like bleeding and those old practices where they would open up areas where they believed spirits were caught or held, or where tumors would show up in the bodies. Shamans would tattoo those areas or scar those areas, and do like that self-mutilation or cutting, and kind of opening up those areas where they believed there was a sense of spirit caught, or energy held, or a blockage within the body. And so in a lot of indigenous tribes back in the day, if they ever showed like a tumor, if they ever had some sort of deformity or something, you'll see like tribal markings over the goiter, or over the area in the body, or where there was a void. They also believed where there had been soul loss, or like mental loss, so there was a sense of something that was created and there was a void, they would tattoo over it, like almost creating a new skin. So it would create, in a sense of artistry, but the symbolic and the meaning behind it was essentially to create a coverage of protection over somewhere that may be more vulnerable to evil spirits, or the other side, or something that seemed to be exposed and was left exposed in that person's life, mentally, emotionally, as well as physically. So shamans have used tattoos. I mean, I could go on and on about all of that. There's way more, and it's a rich history if you're drawn to that. And I'm by no means an expert, but there's a lot of historical reference there. Your second part of the question, I'm going to hit on now, when you said, how do I charge and ritualize the tattoos to heighten my spiritual practice? So really, tattoos, depending on what you're using, I don't know if you're doing them yourself, or if you're going to an artist to do them and you're doing the drawings yourself, you can channel the drawings, obviously, and then if you're bringing them to an artist, I would be conscious of the materials being used, because the pigmentation and the water, if it's water-based, or whatever they're using as their base, all have the ability to be imbued. Really, words, and I've talked about this a lot, the power of language and word is life-giving. When we look at the very beginning of the gospel, and that origination of the Old Testament Actually, it's not in the Old Testament. It's in the New Testament. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. There's a sense of word and the power of word, of actionable echoing, whether that's frequency or sound or the originating sound. There's a lot of interpretations of that. But basically, language in itself is imbued. Then when you take material compounds, if you're taking earth or you're taking elements of the mineral kingdom, if you're using graphite, if it depends on what, again, in the minerals is being used for the coloration. They use all sorts of things for coloration. You can go as deep as you want with that in a very spiritual practice. It is personal, so I would say this is a personal practice in all that you do. Rituals are very personal. Anytime that you are performing a ritual and it's not personal, it takes the energy out of it. It has no power. This is like when prayers feel totally vacant, or when ceremonies and they're just putting incense and it's like, it feels rote and mechanical. There's no power in that. It has no energy being imbued into it. So you create the energy that is going into the action of the ceremony and the ritual. That comes from you. This is why no matter what you're reading, whether you are reading cards, you are reading irises, you are reading a palm, you are reading the stars and astrology, whether you're reading, it doesn't matter. If you were a reader, you were able to glean information from the power that is given from you and the energy that is there. Okay, you can ask cards to speak to you. You can ask any sort of energetic response of spirit and language, and they can speak through that formula or that way that you were asking spirit to speak. Water, and we've talked about this before when I talked about crystals, and I have a video in the archive about crystals and the power and the potential there. But essentially, anytime you are using water, it has the ability to be imbued. The molecules are absorbent. They are storers of memory. And anytime you imbue water, water's been used, again, for thousands of years. Holy water, baptismal water, reading tea leaves, there's all sorts of ways to utilize the energy within water. Even water is, like, they have water computers, molecular computers now. So much is stored and can be stored in water, and emotional energy is stored in water. So the way that you would charge a ritual or move it into a practice, first of all, is to realize that you are the one that is imbuing, that is setting the tone, that is setting the intention for that ceremony. So make it sacred. And really, this can be done in any practice. And I teach this, like when we learn ceremonial practices, there are intelligent ways to be aware of sacred geometry and how a circle disperses energy and light different than a triangle and things like this. But essentially, the way that you use your sacred space and the power of the ceremony is from you. It comes from your own heart, which is your electromagnetic field generator. Your heart is an electromagnetic organ. And so putting the energy of your own heart and soul into what you are doing is what will cause the power in the ritual or the ceremony itself. So if you're wanting to charge water, or you're wanting to charge a particular tattoo, or wanting to charge and channel a particular image and draw that, then what I would do from there is literally, I would create in your own electromagnetic field a sense of heightened power. So you can charge your own heart just the way that you get passionate about something. You can do this from speaking on it. What people say, that they get on their soapbox after a while of charging. Essentially, it's a breathwork pattern. You can do this. Tantra has the shake, right, where you shake. Kundalini yoga has the fire breath, where you start to charge, pump, 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 pump. There's a lot of ways you can do it. You can even just create it spherically with your own hands and palm chakra, where I'm spitting on the screen. But essentially an open mouth, where you want the aperture of your mouth to be open a little bit, enough to move the breath in and out of your chest. So all around, and kind of keeping the heart space moving fast, and you kind of charge it. You can do this by ceremonially stomping. You can do this again like the tantric shake or the dance that kind of enlivens. Ceremonial dancing, this has been around in the ancient community for a long time. Essentially, this is amplifying out the energy in the heart. Power, power, power. Even like when you see people trance dancing, where they're getting, and it's like, it's just the repetitive beat that moves you into a harmonious frequency where all of your electromagnetic charge is output, 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 output. When you're in that state, your palm chakras are highly charged. Your fingers are going to have a lot of blood flow. You're going to feel that tingle. You're going to get that electromagnetic kind of charge of static electricity going. You can hold, this is my teacup, but imagine that this had water. I drink tea, I drink a lot of it. But you could hold water, you could hold a crystal, you could hold whatever the tattoo combination, if you have ink in there, whatever it is, or you could hold a piece of paper if you're going to channel a art piece there. And within that ceremony, set the intention for spirit to guide the imagery, the symbol, the message that is being created, so that this can be a sense of a map, or a sense of a protection, or a sense of a guidance from spirit that needs to be long lasting upon your skin. And set that intention. That can be easily done through ritual, and again, that amplification of the electromagnetic frequency from the charge of your heart, using your palm chakras to move that energy outward into another object, letting that be absorbed, and then from there putting that on the body. There's a whole, gosh, this video is already 20 minutes long, but there's a whole nother bit about the absorbency in the skin. I have 2 tattoos, and they highly significant to me, but there is a whole nother topic of absorption and materials that absorb, that are organic in nature. The interesting thing about like trees, if they're like etched into a tree, even minerals etched into particular minerals and stones and these types of things, they have a different length of longevity. The body, obviously, it has the length of longevity of your personal life, how long you will live. So this is a sense of making that statement in symbol that this will be something that will last, and that you want implemented into your body, into your integrated life force for the rest of your living life in this incarnation. So this is a highly impactful intention of why you would put it on the form, and why it would grow with you and stay with you, versus ceremonial washing or cleansing, or putting ashes on the body, or cutting the hair, or doing different things that have a different length of longevity. So there's a lot of intentional devotion that is held in the skin, because it is your tent, it is your carrier of your soul and your spirit in this current incarnation, and the expression of what that looks like, and the artistry, the personal artistry and expression of what that carries, and how you show that out as a lighthouse to the world in this incarnation. I hope that was a blessing to you. There's a lot of material. I could have gone in a lot of directions. That was a great question. If you guys have questions, always feel free to send them in. You can send them in on my website at themodernshaman.net, and just state in the contact form that this is a question for YouTube. That's where I get my questions, and I send them out to you all. We'll be back here next week with another video. Blessings.